Vicky Foxcroft.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The last few weeks have been an absolute roller coaster. We've heard passionate speeches from all sides urging the government to find another way forward. Time and time again, the moral argument has been put forward. But time and time again, political games have been played and votes lost. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not about scoring points in this place or that. This is about real people. Sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's about real people. It's about how we look after and care for those who are most in need. It's about fairness, about morals. It's about building the kind of society we want to see. In PMQs yesterday, the Prime Minister was asked 6 times to confirm that no one would be worse off with these changes, but declined to do so. Earlier this week, I asked the Chancellor directly what he would be putting in place to ensure that the 9,000 families in Lewisham Deptford, of which 5,500 of these families are working families, how he and his government would ensure they're not out of pocket by £1,300. At a time when rents are rising, when people are having to turn to food banks because they're struggling to pay their bills and feed their families, people will turn to credit. People will fall into arrears with their rent. People will be made homeless. And what does the Chancellor have to say about that? That he's listening? Well, that's a start. That he'll change his plans. No such luck as yet.
Can't help it.
No, Madam Deputy Speaker. He says that he'll introduce a national living wage. A national living wage? What a cheek. The Living Wage Foundation do a fantastic job of campaigning for a real living wage. This is no living wage. This is quite simply spin. The Chancellor is grossly mistaken if he thinks that people will be fooled. He has stolen the brand of a fantastic organisation and in an instant contaminated and muddied the waters. When tax credits were introduced by a Labour government, they were introduced because there was a real need for them. This government's failure to build a better economy means that this need is still there.
Yeah. Very grateful for giving way on that point. But does she agree with me, when we've heard a great deal from the party opposite about the rise in tax credits over the last decade, that the Institute of Fiscal Studies stated very clearly that child poverty would have stayed the same or risen rather than fall substantially without these increases in tax credits. And there is evidence to suggest that these reforms prevented a large rise in inequality. That is what tax credits achieved. That is why the expenditure was worthwhile.
I thank the honourable member for her intervention, and I completely agree with everything that she's gone and said. I'm trying to remember where I was from. Right, personally, I think it's wrong that governments subsidise large employers. Large employers can and should pay their staff more. That is the solution that we should all be working on together. Not tit-for-tat political point scoring. And one of the best ways for staff to organise and put pressure on their employers is through their trade unions. If the government had any sense of moral code, it would be working with the trade unions to raise wages and in the long term eliminate tax credits altogether. Now that must be the goal. But this government's doing anything but that. It's attempting to hamper the great work trade unions do by introducing the negative trade union reform bill. Give way.
Remember where you were, Vicky. But you do recognise that, the Honourable Lady, I hope, will recognise that the national living wage, which she has applauded, is a way of addressing exactly the concern that she's just raised. It's been a very effective way of raising the wages of those who are in employment.
Firstly, the national living wage that you're talking about isn't a national living wage that will drive up people's standards. And also, in terms of the cuts, in terms of tax credits and people's wages at the time, people will be worse off because of these changes, and that's the reason why this debate's come forward today. Right, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is a joke. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Their policies, quite simply, aren't joined up. Whilst the front bench have been laughing at stories of people in housing troubles, members from my party are working with trade unions to improve the lives of millions. In finishing, I want to urge the government to halt the cuts to tax credits until we can guarantee that no family will be worse off. Thank you.